interviews that she did in Spanish and then translate them to English while we just had to transcribe them into English. So she had to take them to So then we coded the data using ATLAS-TI, and we came up with meaning units and families, and we cross-checked each other to make sure that we had the same ideas as to what those meaning units and families would be. And then the components of self-determination theory naturally emerged from that coding.
Great results, many. So we are basing our results based on self-determination theory, first with the component of relatedness and competence, which relatedness refer to the relationship that the swimmer has with her family, teammates, friends outside from sport, and coaches. Whereas competence refers to how confident the swimmer feels while practicing or while competing, and how comfortable she feels there. And autonomy simply refers to how able she is to pick or select her stroke or event. And then based on, we created 2 categories, so besides the 3 components, we decided to create a category of perceived benefits and perceived disadvantages. And 3 themes emerged: time, change, stress, and pressure. However, what changes between dropout and engaged are the perspective. So time, both perceive swimming as time-consuming, but, for example, engaged perceived it as, yes, it's time-consuming, but it's worth it to me. It's going to give me results. I don't care. Whereas the dropout say, oh, yes, it's time-consuming, and I don't want to deal with it anymore. I just want more time for myself. Therefore, they want to change. They are pursuing new changes. They want to do other activities besides swimming, and that's why they're dropping out. Now, stress also has 2 different perspectives. They engaged perceive stress and pressure as something that enhances their performance. So it's okay with them for them to feel that stress and that pressure. And the dropout swimmers perceive it as, oh no, I don't want to deal with it anymore. It's too much pressure, whether from parents or competition. That takes us to the discussion section. Yes. So it's presented in order of relevance. So it's according to our meaning units. So first, relatedness and competence are very consistent to our literature. Yeah. Cool. And then autonomy was hardly ever mentioned, and we couldn't find much. And then the 2 categories that I mentioned, and they both, whether engaged or dropout, perceive like benefits and disadvantages. Whether dropout, like they have good memories and bad memories of it, and the engaged have good experiences and bad experiences from the sport. Now, speaking about culture, we didn't find many differences between the collectivist and the individualist, and we don't believe that it's due to the nature of the swimming culture itself. Then, in the general culture, we cannot generalize a culture based on the perceptions of 2 people only. Therefore, we want more people in our study so we can tell you what a culture actually means or represents. So for our limitations, there were many. So first, we couldn't find as many American participants as we wished, so that forced us to reduce our number of participants. And then timing, well, traveling takes time. We had to wait for spring break to come. We also depended on the schedules of the swimmers, so that wasn't under our control. IRB approval took time. I had to translate all of their forms, and I had to investigate all the rules and regulations as well as ethical and implications and legislation from Mexico in terms of research. Language, also there's a lot of slang in Spanish, so we found it hard to fit it in the English language. And then as implications, This is a great base for future research in this topic for countries, for many. And lastly, as an implication, since our study is like very, very specific, we only had females, we only had adolescents, like a certain age, from a certain city, state, it's very specific. Therefore, we need more people, more countries involved in order for us to contribute more to the field and expand our knowledge horizons. So, that being said, time, references, and any questions?
So you mentioned several times how only having 2 participants from each country doesn't maybe allow that cultural difference to bring up. So if you were to design a study that might show more of a cultural difference, what would that look like?
I think first you'd have to do a larger qualitative study to get more of an idea of what's going on, and then from there do something quantitative, just because that way you could have a much larger base of participants and just get solid answers when it comes down to it. But I think in order to take that step and get something that would be more reflective of the culture in general, you'd have to do like another small study first.
Yeah.
There just wasn't anything at this level.
So,
Questions would be based off of this on the quantitative study.
yeah, so we really didn't know what we would find. So that's another reason, I mean, multiple reasons, but that's another reason that we kept it small. We didn't know if we would find differences or what the differences would be. So it speaks to what Elena was saying, that once we do know what the differences are, we can reach out more to the quantitative study.
Yeah, and something else interesting, I think it would aid us to look at older populations too. The interesting thing about, we only looked at age 14 to 17, and at that point, developmentally, I mean, you're kind of finding your own independence, but you're still pretty independent or dependent on your parents. So I think results might vary greatly after the age of 18 or after people leave the home setting and move on to whatever the next step in life is.
Yeah, we also came up with a swimming culture thing because all of the swimmers, regardless of the country, regardless of whether they were dropout or engaged, they all presented very similar answers. So that's why probably we might be able to focus more in the culture of a certain sport rather on the culture of a country.
I think you mentioned exactly that your age group probably limits your results. Specifically when you said you didn't have much really into autonomy in your developmental level. That's probably a pretty big concept to them. However, if you look further into it, do you think that the dropouts that said, well, I dropped out because swimming takes a lot of time and I want to do other things, could, looking into that further, and it could be a language barrier, I guess, looking at that further point to the need for autonomy or
Possibly.
for autonomy more?
Yeah, I think possibly. They more attributed to specific things, which we then, like, I want to spend more time with my friends. I want to spend more time, or I'm not. I want to have more time on the weekends with these social groups. So a lot of the timing things really overlap more with the relatedness piece than anything else. Like one of the girls, for example, she came off as kind of quiet and like she didn't relate that well to a lot of the girls in the team. So she wanted more time to do things that she enjoyed better and was better at. So competence with people that she related to better. So the other two really appeared more there. But I think, yeah, with an expansive participants, or even if we'd interviewed for a longer amount of time, like each interview was probably like an hour, more might have come up.
I think older people too, so
Yeah.
I think we also saw it more when we were talking about if the athlete felt like they were forced to swim or were forced to stay in the sport. We saw bits of that in some of the Mexican interviews. So their parents telling them you have to keep swimming, or I feel like my parents are making me continue to swim.
So you had a really ambitious project here that you wanted to do a lot with. And your chair was on staff. So with that being said, I know that you had some logistical challenges where you had to make some modifications in some of the methodological pieces weren't quite as sound as a result of some of that. So knowing what you know now, just not results-wise, but just based on the logistics and the methodology, how would you redesign the study? How would you have changed it?
By changing the debate.
I went to Mexico and did seven interviews, but I mean, I didn't have enough time to translate and transcribe all of them, so, yeah, and they didn't have enough time to find enough participants, so that would help.
I really do think that, like, because when we were going through and starting to code all the data, I think that since we only had 4 participants, we got a bit confused how to organize all of it. So I think if we had more participants on both sides, we could, I mean, it would be more rich, I think, and it would make more sense, and it would have more clear definitions, because we would have 2 very distinct groups. So I think that would help as well, and time would help.
Yeah, I think the same thing. Honestly, there's not much I would have changed, and I think one of the biggest reasons is because I feel like more participants would have added so much more. And then if we'd had that chance to have more participants, then it might have been clearer some other things we could have changed methodologically.
You then still have access to American swimmers, and then add 5 or 7 and then need to be equal groups in qualitative research, and then continue to analyze. And I know that you will be moving on and being busy with life and other things that you're doing, but this study has a really big potential to provide contribution to our literature.
Yeah.
I already have, so I already have a couple interviews still to transcribe and look at, and like Humana said, she has them too, so we're at a good spot to continue with it, which is good.
Yeah, we've already talked about potentially continuing.
Forgive me if you address this. It may have been getting up in the middle of the night to change a diaper last night that has me not hearing everything. But you sort of talked about self-determination theory. You had the 3 categories: time, change, stress, pressure, and then you went back to the 3 categories of self-determination theory. I was wondering how the categories from the research fit into those categories from the theory.
They were in categories, they were themes, so those themes are within the categories.
So they address all of them, or each one addresses all of them? Like, is there a, could you draw a picture of it?
Yeah. So as we coded, we just, like, themes started to come into place. Those of you might know who have coded interviews before. And then we each went through and we each coded all of the interviews. And then when grouping into families, we found that things would just kind of emerge, and then we could, like, translate as a theory or as a factor of self-determination theory. For example, like every time they talked about like friends outside of swimming, and every time they talked about their coach, and every time they talked about like their parents or their sibling, we just like grouped all that, like, oh, okay, that could be relatedness. But then we at the same time grouped like, all right, well, sibling and parents is family, coach is like support. So we had a bunch of different categories, or a bunch of different families that appeared from the themes. Then after that, after going through, since we were looking at it through the lens of self-determination theory, we just chose the families that were closest to self-determination theory. Then we went back through and double-checked everything. And then we also chose the 3 highest other themes and discussed those as well. So they ended up being the perceived benefits and perceived disadvantages themes. Does that make sense?
Should I draw it? I'll draw it.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So then where does the time, the stress, and the pressure fit in?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
actually have the
Autonomy,
perceived advantages
advantages,
and
competency,
disadvantages.
Okay.
perceived
Yeah.
disadvantages, perceived benefits. And then from here you have the time, change, and pressure / stress. So these 3 themes obviously were big ones that we found and looked at self-determination theory. And then from these 2 other big themes, these themes were, I spelled change wrong. These 3 themes were the biggest themes in that.
Yeah, because these appeared first, and then we were trying to figure out how we were going to organize them. So we found most of the time when the athletes were talking about them, they were talking about them as it affected their experience positively or negatively. Pretty much every time they talked about one or the other. So that's then how we split that up in order to make it
Okay.
Yeah, and they talked about it, and the perspective was the only thing that changed, but they all talked about time changing and pressure. Yeah.
Answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Only 4 seconds.
Kind of.
Okay, we're out of time. Okay.